Hey everybody, Mike Claiborne here, and welcome. I'm with ClaibsOnline.com, as you well know, and we're going to talk with our good friends from Ameren, Illinois today to talk about weather changing, first of all, and a few other things that are going on within Ameren, Illinois. And with us today is the Vice President of Operations. He is George Justice. And first of all, George, thanks for joining us today. I've been looking forward to talking to you.
Well, me as well. Glad to be here this afternoon.
Well, let's talk about a few things. I mentioned weather right off the top. How often does Ameren, Illinois monitor the weather? Is it weekly or is it daily? Because obviously weather is a big factor in how you guys are able to service your customers.
Actually, we have folks that are monitoring weather all the time. You know, most folks don't realize we serve about a 44,000 square mile territory, and that's bigger than the entire state of Indiana. So we have a pretty big territory to monitor, and the northern part of the state up toward I-80 and up Chicago way has one climate zone. Yet we serve all the way to the southern end of the state, down on the Ohio River even. So that can have a completely different set of weather. So we've got folks looking at the weather all the time.
Wow, that's a whole lot of territory to cover. So with that said, I'm sure Ameren has a meteorologist standing somewhere being able to not only monitor the weather, but hopefully predict what could take place down the road.
We certainly do. We don't have a meteorologist on staff. We do have a private weather service that we hire to customize the forecast for the areas that we serve, but we also rely a lot on the National Weather Service, and we've got a meteorologist there named Chris Miller who's just a phone call away, and he's based in Lincoln, Illinois.
So he has a real good feel of what the territory may look like in that neck of the woods.
He has been very helpful over the years as we try to predict what we need to do as a utility to prepare for bad weather.
All right. One of the things I definitely wanted to talk about is the Ambassador of Excellence Award. You received that from the National Weather Service. I understand that's a very prestigious honor to maintain, and you guys have been able to be the recipients of it.
Yeah, we're pretty proud of that. There are 11,000 plus weather-ready nation ambassadors across the country, and those are all sorts of things from private businesses to government. But there were only 76 organizations across the country that earned this award, and we've worked really hard to get there because we really want to prepare for bad weather and get our customers prepared for bad weather so that we minimize any outages that might occur for them.
You know, one of the things that I'm sure you are proud of is your Emergency Operations Center. Ameren, Illinois has one, and there's nothing more important than having that operations center up and running, especially when we have an outage or some sort of emergency. As we're talking about weather today, that's something I'm sure you guys man extensively, but also are very proud of what you're being able to do and making sure your customers get the service that they're asking for.
I've been with this company a good deal of time, and I am really proud of what we've been able to accomplish with our Emergency Operations Center. When we do have bad weather, be that everything from a tornado to an ice storm, we have a 24/7 operations center based in the central part of the state where we have a lot of highly trained folks there that are helping manage our storm response for customers. And, right now during COVID, a lot of what we're doing with that Emergency Operations Center is virtual, just like we're doing here today. But we're still able to accomplish a lot of the things because the technology has really caught up with the situation we're in now. And so what were TV screens in a room are now computer monitors wherever that might be. So, for example, I'm in the St. Louis area, and our EOC, our Emergency Operations Center, is in Decatur. So it's a couple hours apart. But we can do everything that we would do sitting around a table virtually as well.
Now, when you have one of those emergency operations centers, how many people are involved in it?
We always have we have some emergency response specialists, probably 5 or 6 of those that are always doing something related to emergency response. But when we have an event, we may engage, even in a smaller storm, 500-600 people across the state. And there's probably 30 or 40 folks in leadership positions managing all that stuff that has to go on to respond to an emergency.
George Justice is our guest. He is the Vice President of Operations for Ameren, Illinois. And George, as I mentioned at the outset, the winter, well, it's just around the corner, and it can pose a lot of problems. While we don't get as much snow, it seems like, as we used to, those ice storms can weigh heavily, not only on individuals, but certainly the power lines. What kind of impact can an ice storm and just ice building up on the lines have for you and certainly your team?
I got to tell you, Mike, the thing that we dread more than anything is an ice storm. What typically happens is the trees, as well as the power lines, ice up, and then the trees start crashing through the lines and causing all sorts of damage. It just wreaks havoc, and it can go on for days because we'll go put something back up in the air and drive away, and half an hour later another tree crashes through the same thing. So it's an effort that we don't like to do. We have to deal with it a couple of times a year, and we know what we're doing. We just don't want to do it. And I like to remind folks, the biggest ice storm that I've seen in my career happened on November 30th of 2006. So that season is just around the corner.
And when you have it just around the corner, what other preparations do you try and take as far as making sure you're ready for it? Because as you mentioned, when these lines go down, it can really take out a grid, and a lot of people who are counting on energy at this time of the year, especially trying to keep their homes warm.
Yeah, we actually practice. We have practice sessions where we bring folks in. We don't have storms every day, so a few folks are out of practice. So we make sure everybody's sharp and ready to do what they need to do during a storm. And we got to think about everything from not just putting power lines and fixing power lines, but all those people that are involved. We have to put them up in lodging. We have to feed them, and even those tasks have become a lot more complicated with COVID protocols now. So we figured out how to do that, but that's a part of what we do, and that's our business. And I like to think we're pretty good at it.
I'm glad you brought that up because we just think the boots on the ground, addressing an issue, jumping back in the truck and going home. There's a lot of things that lead up to it. And you just mentioned housing and food and obviously the protocols you want to maintain during COVID. Uh, that plan itself, I would imagine, takes a lot of time when it comes to preparation.
It certainly does. I mean, we have all sorts of processes and procedures that we're continually reviewing. And we had a storm earlier this year in the central part of the state, Lincoln, over towards Champaign, and we learned a lot. That was our first big storm with COVID, and we learned a lot about that. And our biggest challenge in that storm, for example, was how do we feed all these people? Because we used to have big buffet lines and folks would dish out whatever, and you can't do that in a COVID environment. So we've learned to use things like food trucks that come prepare the meals and hand them out in styrofoam containers individually, and that's worked pretty well for us. So we are continually learning, adjusting, and trying to do even better to minimize the amount of time customers are without power.
And when in doubt, there's always a peanut butter and jelly sandwich to hold you over.
Well, we can always drive through McDonald's, and we have done that.
One of the things at this time of the year, customers, you have to make sure their safety is in play here as well. What should customers do if they see a down power line? Because they fall in their backyards, maybe in their front yard, certainly on their property. And you have to think about being safe with that respect. So what's the first thing they should do to make sure that they're safe and you guys can get out there and make sure it's going to be good for everyone?
Well, the first thing they should do is stay at least 10 feet away from any down power line. Warn anybody that might be around it, but call us at 800-755-5000 to report it. Uh, and I've seen this many times. There's a power line down across a road, and folks drive across it. That line can still be energized and cause damage to your vehicles. If you've ever seen a car that was touched by a high voltage power line, you'd never do that again. But uh, and never touch anything like that. And one of the key things, and unfortunately, I've seen some of this as well, is keep your family and pets away from the lines. Kids playing outside after a storm is a very dangerous situation. So,
I want to ask you about, you mentioned a car. And I know is it a myth or what, the rubber from the tires insulates people in the car. If you're wearing rubber boots, you're going to be okay. What's the truth and what's something that you're going to just shake your head and say, it's not necessarily going to work here?
actually, the safest thing you can do if a power line falls on your car is stay in your car because the tires will insulate you from that line. The Unless your car is on fire or some other reason you have to get out of it, the best thing you can do is just sit there until we come and take those lines off your car and make it safe for you. But if your car is on fire, you need to get out of it. You do not want to be touching the car and the ground at the same time because you become the path for electricity. And we've had, unfortunately, a number of members of the public become injured or even killed that way. So if you have to get out, you want to jump out of the car with both feet at the same time and hop away from the location so that you aren't injured.
I'm going to stay in the car and just call you at home.
That's the
I'm not
best
going
thing.
to do
That's
anything.
the best thing.
Yeah, just go call you. What other items should we let our viewers know about with regard to the winter setting in and making sure that not only they're safe, but they really have a better understanding of the things that you guys and your team are able to do for them?
Well, one of the things that folks can do, especially in the winter, is have an emergency kit, some food available. And if you go to Ameren.com, we provide all sorts of guidelines on the things you might want to have available to you. You know, you don't think about things like medications and, canned food and water and so forth. So those are some things that folks can do to be ready for us. And I would also like to add, you know, folks sometimes are reluctant to call us at the number I gave earlier, 800-755-5000. And for us, that's the best thing that they can do because you might assume your neighbor called it in, that the whole neighborhood's out. But a lot of people make that same assumption. And the more folks that call in really helps us identify where our issues are and be able to respond faster.
And fortunately, because of technology, you can kind of track how progress is being made with respect to your outage in a lot of situations. How much, and you said you've been in the business for a while, how much have you seen that element of your industry change over the last few years where your customers can stay more in tune and more in touch with what's going on?
Oh my goodness. In the last 20 years, it's like night and day. When I started doing this type of work, we got it on when we got it on. Might be out for a week or longer in an ice storm, for example. And the only way they knew when their power was going to be back on is continue to call us. But now you can go to Ameren.com. You can sign up for alerts, and we will send you texts or emails, or phone calls, whatever you would like to keep you appraised of what your outage situation is, what caused it, what time we are saying that we'll have it, or the estimated time that you will be restored. So I would encourage everyone to do that. And if you have elderly parents or kids or whatever that you want to keep track of, you can sign up for outages on their property as well. So those are all good things that have happened in the last 20 years that. Particularly in the last couple of years that we've been made available to our customers.
All right, for you being a veteran in this industry, give me the worst scenario that you've been part of. And because of technology, you probably won't see that happen again.
Uh, Again, I'll go back to, I mentioned earlier, the worst ice storm I ever saw was in 2006. And, it took us 8 days. We had, a large number of customers out across the state. It took us 8 days to get the power back on everywhere. I would say because of the technology, the information that we have available, the electronic things that we do, that same storm today would probably take 3 days at the most to restore all those customers. So we have a lot of internal tools and so forth that we use to really prioritize how we get customers back on, things that we didn't have back then.
Well, I'm glad you have it now. And I'm sure your customers are as well, because there's nothing more helpless than being in the midst of a power outage, especially when it's cold outside. And it sounds like you and your team are ready for just about anything as the winter is just around the corner. George, again, congratulations on the award. That's an outstanding achievement, and I'm sure you and your team are extremely happy about it. Secondly, thank you for taking the time. And more importantly, for you and your team, be safe. And we appreciate you spending some time with us today.
Mike, thank you.
He's George Justice. I'm Mike Claiborne. This is Claves Online, brought to you by Ameren, Illinois.